I was ankle-deep in pasture mud when the sirens hit. 3 squad cars, lights flashing, tires skidding on gravel, came roaring up my drive like I was harboring a fugitive. I wiped the sweat off my forehead, one hand still holding a busted fence post, the other gripping my old pair of pliers, standing near the edge of my field, screaming into her phone like she was calling in an airstrike. Was the new neighbor. Neon pink windbreaker, bob haircut that hadn't seen a breeze in years. Karen Langley. I'd seen her before, pacing around her front lawn like a mall cop with too much caffeine. But this was the first time she brought back up. She's calling 911 on me, I muttered, more confused than angry, until I realized she was pointing right at me. That's him, she screeched. He's trespassing. He's threatening me. He's got tools. I looked down. Yeah, I had tools, because I was fixing a section of fence that had split after the last summer storm. A fence on my land. Mind you, land that's been in my family since before HOA even existed in this part of Arizona. The officers stepped out of their cars, hands hovering near their belts, eyes scanning me like I was the Unabomber in overalls. Sir, one started. We got a call about a disturbance. Before he could finish, I slowly reached back into my pocket. The air shifted, tensed. Karen gasped. He's reaching for something, she yelped. I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open, and held up the badge. Deputy Sheriff. Retired, I said calmly. Name's Thomas Granger. This is my property. The mood shifted so fast you could hear the dust settle. The officer who spoke gave a little nod, stepping back. The other two exchanged glances. And Karen, oh, Karen, her face turned from righteous fury to instant regret. That was the moment I knew this wasn't over. See, 2 weeks earlier, it was quiet around here. The kind of peaceful you only get just before the world goes sideways. The sun was just starting to peek over the ridge, steam rising off the hay bales like ghost breath. I'd just finished morning feed and was walking the north pasture when I saw her. Karen, arms crossed, standing just past the fence line. You know your cows are practically on my lawn, she said without introduction, like she was the queen of subdivision etiquette. They're on my side of the fence, I replied, trying to smile. Right where they're supposed to be. She didn't smile back, just gave me this tight nod, like she was filing a report in some mental HOA database. I told myself to let it go. First impressions can be weird. But something in her eyes told me plain, this wasn't the last I'd see of her. Turns out I was right. The next morning, I found a note duct taped to my tractor. Red marker scrawled across white paper like a ransom letter. Cease all activity near our shared property line. Final warning. Signed in neat cursive, Karen Langley, HOA President. I laughed. Tossed it in the barn trash, figuring maybe she just needed time to settle in. But time didn't help. She got worse. Within days, she'd called animal control, filed a noise complaint about my tractor, and even left another note saying my American flag was too large and could be a visual hazard to neighbors. I'd spent 2 decades serving that flag, 2 in uniform, another 2 behind the badge. And now some suburban tyrant wanted me to take it down. That's when it clicked. Karen didn't care about cows, or fences, or noise. Karen cared about control. And today, she thought she could control me with 3 squad cars and a bunch of panicked lies. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make threats. I gave my statement, nodded to the deputies, and went back to work. I could feel her eyes on me from her porch, arms crossed again, sipping from a mug that said live, laugh, love. But there wasn't any love in that stare. As I pounded the new post into the dirt, one thought kept bouncing around in my head. This is going to get worse before it gets better. That was the day I realized, this woman didn't want peace. She wanted power. The note was duct-taped to my tractor like a ransom demand. That line ran through my head as I sat on the porch with my morning coffee. watching a pair of doves circle the big elm by the barn. I'd tossed that note in the trash 2 days ago, figuring maybe Karen was just blowing off steam. But this morning, I noticed something different. A white sedan parked halfway down my drive. City plates. Woman in a beige polo and clipboard in hand. My stomach sank before she even opened the door. HOA enforcement, or worse. County compliance. Sure enough. She made her way toward the barn, scanning a piece of paper like she was reading off an arrest warrant. "Mr. Granger?" she asked. "We received a report of illegal livestock activity and improper waste disposal. Mind if I take a look around?" I blinked. "Waste disposal? Ma'am. This is a farm. The cows do their business and we compost it." She didn't laugh. "Just made a note." "You got a call from my neighbor, didn't you?" I asked. "I'm not at liberty to say," she replied, lips pursed. Already inspecting the feed shed. I followed her around, showing her the water lines, the feed bins, the vet records I kept in a binder older than half the HOA board. Everything was clean, up to code, documented. Still, she took photos, logged a formal visit, left me a yellow slip that said pending review. An hour later, the county left. 10 minutes after that, I saw Karen at her upstairs window, arms folded, binoculars out. That wasn't the first visit. And it wasn't the last. Over the next week, I had a parade of city cars rolling down my drive like I was running a meth lab. First, animal control. We got a call about underfed livestock showing signs of aggression. Aggression? The most dangerous thing my cows ever did was knock over a feed bucket when they got excited. Then zoning enforcement. Someone reported unpermitted structures. They flagged the hay shed I built 15 years ago. I had to dig out old blueprints just to prove it wasn't a new addition. Every time, the same routine: someone shows up, checks things out, finds nothing wrong, leaves with an apology and a shrug. And every time, I'd see Karen in her yard, pretending to weed the flower bed, phone in hand, watching everything. It was harassment disguised as process. And it was working. I started falling behind on maintenance. My cattle permit renewal got delayed because of the flagged inspections. Buyers started asking questions. My son stopped coming out to help, said it was getting weird with that lady staring all the time. And me? I was starting to feel it too. Like someone was slowly squeezing my whole life into a box labeled violation. But the worst moment came on a Saturday. I was helping my boy, Jacob, replace a broken fence rail near the front lot. He's 16. Good kid. Quiet. Smart. Handy with a hammer. We were just chatting, weather, school. Nothing special, when I heard tires crunching on gravel. Sheriff's cruiser. Again. Deputy stepped out. Looked more tired than concerned. "Hey, Tom," he said, nodding at me. "Got a call about a man with a weapon in your front pasture." I stared at him, then looked at Jacob, who was holding a hammer. "A hammer?" I repeated flatly. "Yeah," the deputy said, scratching his neck. "Look, I don't think this is anything, but dispatch logged it, so here I am." Jacob froze. "Did she call them on me?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, son, she did." The deputy sighed. "Just maybe don't wave the hammer around for optics." I said nothing, just watched the cruiser roll away. That night, I sat on the porch long after sundown. The cicadas were humming, and the wind smelled like dry sage. Karen's porch lights flickered on and off like a signal. She never came out, just stayed behind the glass. She was winning. Not legally, not morally, but in the day-to-day battle of stress and disruption. She was gaining ground, and I was losing time, money, peace of mind. But not my temper. Not yet. Because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't some old guy with cows and a porch swing. I was trained for pressure. I'd spent half my life building cases, tracking patterns, collecting evidence that held up in court. If she wanted a war of paperwork and patience, then I'd bring her the kind of war she wasn't ready for. I wasn't dealing with a neighbor. I was dealing with a campaign. She watched me with binoculars like I was a hawk stealing from her feeder. That's not an exaggeration. Every morning, without fail, I'd walk outside to feed the animals. And there she'd be, Karen Langley, standing behind her second-story window with those cheap black binoculars pressed to her face. It was like she thought she was on some suburban SWAT team, surveilling enemy territory. And apparently, I was the enemy. I tried to laugh it off at first. Told my buddy Ron down at the feed store, I think I've got my own private HOA paparazzi. But it wasn't funny for long. One morning, I went out to fix a sagging gate hinge and found Karen pacing the fence line with a tape measure and a notebook. She was muttering to herself, stopping every few feet to jot something down. Her clipboard was marked Boundary Review, HOA Internal Use. Like she was preparing for court. I didn't say a word. I just watched her measure the same fence post twice, then snap a photo with her phone. It wasn't until later that I realized she was trying to prove I'd moved the fence, like I'd stolen an inch of land off her manicured lawn. The thing is, I built that fence with my dad 20 years ago. Used steel posts, cedar rails, and sweat. Nothing fancy. Just strong, straight, and permanent. But facts didn't matter to Karen. Only control did. And now, she was escalating. A week after the hammer incident, I caught her filming my son again. Jacob was cleaning out the water troughs. Just working. Doing chores. Karen stood on her porch. Phone pointed like a weapon. No shame. No explanation. Just filming. I called out, "Mom, you're recording my minor son without permission." She didn't even blink. Just smiled and said, "He's within my line of sight. Perfectly legal." I felt something in my chest tighten. A hot, rising pressure in my throat. But I didn't yell. Didn't storm across the field. Instead, I went inside, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table. Then I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside was a legal pad, a voice recorder, and an old trail cam I used to use for checking on coyotes. I dusted it off. That night, after the house was quiet, I walked the tree line behind the pasture and mounted the trail cam, motion triggered, infrared, time-stamped. I aimed it directly at the stretch of fence Karen seemed obsessed with. Next, I installed a second one in the old oak that faced the barn, just in case. And then I started a log. Date, time, description, every phone call, every fake report, every visit from animal control, zoning, sheriff's deputies. I didn't know how long this would last, but I knew how to build a case. The next morning, Karen was back at it, clipboarding the fence like she was drafting blueprints for a military invasion. I waved. She didn't wave back. Later that day, I caught her on video again, pointing her phone at my dog, Buck, who was napping by the porch. I heard her mutter, "That animal's aggressive. I'll file a report." Buck's a 12-year-old golden retriever with arthritis. He couldn't aggressively chase a tennis ball anymore. I added that to the log. By the end of the week, I had 7 video clips, 3 flagged agency visits, and a stack of printed notices from the HOA, all signed by Karen. They cited made-up infractions like unauthorized post repair and nuisance wildlife because of birds nesting in my barn rafters. She was throwing darts in the dark, hoping one would stick. But while she was filming, measuring, and flailing, I was documenting. Quietly, thoroughly, legally. And then came the break I didn't expect. Late one afternoon, I was inside eating lunch, scrolling through the latest trail cam footage. Most of it was squirrels, wind through trees, shadows shifting across the field, until one clip stopped me cold. Karen, stepping through my fence, wire cutters in hand. She looked around like she was checking for witnesses, then walked right up to the lowest strand of barbed wire and snipped it. The camera caught the sound. Then, clear as day, she turned toward the lens and said, "Now your cows won't bother me again." I paused the video, rewound it, watched it twice. She hadn't just trespassed. She hadn't just damaged private property. She had incriminated herself on video, clear, close, with audio, and she had no idea. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the pure, poetic irony of it. After all her months of accusing me, filming me, calling in fake reports, she'd just handed me the kind of evidence that even the HOA couldn't ignore. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I got to work. That night, I built a digital case file, organized the clips, cropped still frames, labeled every interaction, scanned the notes she'd left on my property, her handwriting, her threats. I even recorded a voice memo where she said, "If you don't move that fence, I will." She thought she was building a case against me. But I was 2 moves from checkmate. She thought she was playing chess. She didn't know I'd already built the board. She stepped into my pasture with wire cutters in her hand. I still remember the sound. The snip of metal slicing through barbed wire. Clean. Sharp. Final. That sound echoed in my head long after I'd watched the trail cam footage. Karen Langley had crossed the line, literally and legally. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The kind where the breeze barely stirred the trees and the only noise came from the cows lowing in the distance. I was inside having a leftover meatloaf sandwich, flipping through the trail cam clips like I did every couple of days, not expecting much. Until that one. There she was, plain as day, stepping through the cedar posts, looking around like she was trying to sneak past a security system, unaware she was walking right into it. She bent down, pulled the wire taut, and snipped. Then she turned toward the lens, clear shot of her face, and muttered, "Now your cows won't bother me again." It wasn't just trespass. It wasn't just vandalism. It was intent. And it was on video. I didn't get mad. I didn't call anyone. Not yet. I went quiet. You see, Karen thought she was clever, that she could push and poke until I snapped and gave her something to use. But what she didn't realize was that I'd spent 22 years building cases that held up in federal court. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to bury her in evidence. That night, while the house was quiet and Buck snored beside my chair, I turned my kitchen table into a war room. I backed up the video to 3 locations, external drive, cloud server, and an encrypted copy emailed to a buddy in the county IT department. Then I got to work scanning every warning note she ever left, each one signed Karen Langley, HOA president. Every email she'd sent to the neighborhood group with subtle jabs like certain residents are refusing to comply with aesthetic fencing guidelines. I organized screenshots of every fake complaint filed under her name, animal control, zoning. Even that absurd one where she claimed my American flag was a visibility hazard. That one still boiled my blood. And then the voice memos. One from 2 weeks back, Karen, yelling from her porch, "If you don't move that fence, I will." Another from the week before, "Your livestock is a threat to my property value." By sunrise, I had enough documentation to choke a city attorney. But I didn't just want to file a complaint. I wanted to make sure it stuck. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into the sheriff's internal system using my retired credentials and submitted a formal report. Civil trespassing, property damage, harassment. Attached were time-stamped videos, photos, voice memos, and a witness statement from Jacob, who'd seen her measuring and filming near the fence the same day she cut it. Then I added one final detail. A notation that I was a retired deputy from Pinal County, service number 8417, with full legal standing to initiate escalation if further harassment occurred. Once that was submitted, I didn't put on my uniform. I didn't need to. The next morning, I parked my marked cruiser, still registered to me with retired status, right next to the barn. Badge clipped to my belt. Coffee in one hand, calm as a preacher on Sunday. Karen showed up right on cue, storming across the field like the HOA queen she thought she was. Phone in the air. Already mid-rant. You need to remove that fence immediately. She barked. You're violating setback regulations. I've contacted the county. This is going to court. I didn't move. Just raised one hand slowly. Mom, I said. Steady as stone. You're trespassing. And as of this morning, a formal complaint has been filed against you with the sheriff's office. She stopped mid-stride. What are you talking about? You're just the farm guy. That's when I shifted. Just slightly. So the sun hit the badge at my waist. Her face drained color like a tipped-over paint can. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. You've been filming me. She shrieked. No. Mom, I said evenly. You've been filming yourself. I just saved the footage. And then, like a movie scene, my buddy Morales, still active duty with the sheriff's office, walked up the drive with 2 other deputies. They weren't in a rush. Didn't need to be. Karen spun around. This is harassment, she shouted. Phone still in hand. I'm calling the real sheriff. Morales didn't flinch. Mom, he said, with the patience of a man who's seen too many HOA meltdowns. He is the sheriff's office. You've been calling him for weeks. Karen blinked like she'd just seen her whole world collapse. I pulled out my phone. Tapped a few times. Turned the screen toward her. There she was. On video. Snipping the fence. Saying the words. She lunged forward. Tried to slap the phone from my hand. One of the deputies stepped between us. Firm but calm. That's enough. Touch him again and you'll be spending the night in a cell. Karen's face burned crimson. You're trying to ruin me, she hissed. I didn't say a word. Just tapped my screen again, and hit send. The clip went straight to county records. And for good measure, I posted a short, anonymous version to my private TikTok. No names. Just facts. She wanted a war of perception. I gave her a war of proof. You're just the farm guy. She screamed. That's when the badge caught the light. Karen Langley had spent weeks pushing me, pushing my son, my animals, my patients. But she never asked the right question. She never asked who I used to be. By the time Morales and the other deputies walked up that drive, she realized too late that the man she'd tried to intimidate was someone who'd put people behind bars for a living, and done it with less evidence than I had on her. The video of her cutting my fence was already on its way to the county servers. The TikTok version, a 15-second clip of her snipping the wire and declaring victory, was catching steam faster than wildfire in August. I didn't think much of it at first. Figured it might get a few dozen views. By sunset, it had over 80,000. Comments started rolling in. She cut his fence over cows. Classic HOA Karen behavior. Lady just committed felony trespass on camera. That's bold. By the next morning, my phone was practically buzzing off the table. Reporters were reaching out. Local folks started driving by. Real slow. Hoping to catch a glimpse of the crazy fence lady. Someone even uploaded a remix of her voice saying, "Now your cows won't bother me again," with a techno beat. Jacob showed it to me over breakfast. I nearly choked on my coffee. But this wasn't just about going viral. This was about accountability. And that came swift. The Willow Creek HOA called an emergency board meeting, 7 p.m. sharp. Community clubhouse. No Zoom. No email vote. This was in person. And they made sure the whole neighborhood knew why. I wasn't invited. Of course. But I didn't need to be. Small towns have long memories and fast thumbs. Within minutes of that meeting starting, I had 3 different neighbors texting me live updates. Karen showed up late. Looked rattled. They're playing the video on a projector. Full screen. Sound on. Everyone is dead silent. Turns out I wasn't the only one Karen had harassed. One couple shared how she called the city on their grandson's lemonade stand for operating an unlicensed food vendor. Another neighbor said Karen once threatened to sue them over decorative gnomes violating visual harmony guidelines. But what really broke the dam was the flag. Old Mr. Jenkins, Vietnam vet, lives 2 streets over, stood up and said, "She told me I had to take down my American flag. Said it clashed with the HOA's neutral palette. I've lived here 23 years. She moved in 7 months ago." The room, apparently, erupted in murmurs, and then silence again, because someone had pulled up the trail cam footage on the big screen. Karen. Fence. Wire cutters. Voice. Boom. She left the meeting early, didn't even grab her clipboard, and when she got home, she found a new sign on my rebuilt fence. Facing her yard. Smile. You're on camera. Neighbors started honking as they drove by. One left a ceramic cow in her yard. Another hung a small American flag from their mailbox. Even if they hadn't flown one before, it wasn't mob justice. It wasn't bullying. It was relief. The whole street had been holding its breath for months. Walking on eggshells. Afraid of being her next target. Now they knew they weren't alone. The board issued her 3 formal citations: harassment, property interference, and misuse of authority. Fines. Mandatory mediation. A 6-month suspension from her position. She tried to fight it. Posted a shaky video of her own. Claiming she was being targeted as a woman who upholds standards. Claimed she felt unsafe. Blamed aggressive rural culture. But the internet doesn't forget, and neither do neighbors. Even her friends, what few she had, started to go quiet. A few removed themselves from the HOA Facebook group. Others stayed silent, waiting for the storm to pass. And I didn't gloat. Didn't post a follow-up. I just kept rebuilding the fence, thicker posts, tighter wire, solar-powered lights lining the top rail. Not because I needed them, because I knew she hated them. And every time I hammered a post into the dirt, I remembered something my father told me when I was a boy. A good fence doesn't just keep things out. It reminds people where the line is. I never had to shout. I just showed the tape. She vanished. Not literally. Just faded. After the meeting at the clubhouse, Karen Langley didn't step foot outside for 3 days. Her curtains stayed drawn. Her porch lights stayed off. The woman who once walked the neighborhood like she owned it now moved like a shadow. And for the first time in weeks, my land was quiet. Not silent, just peaceful. The kind of quiet where the wind rustling through the hay sounds louder than your thoughts. Where the thud of a post driver sinking into soil doesn't feel like work, but restoration. I rebuilt the fence she cut. Not because I had to, Lord knows the cows were never really a threat to her begonias, but because it mattered. Because it was mine. This time, I went bigger. Cedar posts. Steel reinforcement brackets. Barbed wire so tight you could string a tune through it. I even added a row of solar-powered motion lights along the top. Just for good measure. Not because I needed them, because I knew she hated them. But I didn't do it out of spite. Not really. I did it because when someone tries to tear down what you've built, whether it's a fence, a family, or a life, you rebuild. Stronger. Wiser. And maybe just a little taller than before. Buck, my old golden retriever, took up his usual spot on the porch again. After everything, I half expected him to be skittish near the fence. But no. He lay there like nothing had changed, head up, ears perked, tail thumping when I walked by with a bucket of feed. He didn't need closure. He just needed normal. Funny how animals get it right faster than people do. Karen's house changed too. No more HOA yard signs. The Pride of Willow Creek Garden banner came down. The HOA SUV she used to park in her driveway disappeared. She started pulling into the garage like she was sneaking into witness protection. Neighbors noticed. Oh. They noticed. One by one, folks began reclaiming their space. Jenkins flew his American flag again, this time even bigger. The Gomez family painted their mailbox red and hung wind chimes shaped like chili peppers. And me, I planted a new tree near the north pasture. A cottonwood. Same kind my dad once planted when I turned 10. Right next to it, I installed a small wooden sign, simple. Carved by hand. Private property. Respect the line. The HOA board never reinstated Karen as president. She didn't fight it. Not after the video. Not after the citations. She stopped attending meetings altogether. The new board passed a motion, no surveillance on neighbors without consent. No measuring fences unless it involved actual boundary disputes filed through the county. No more weaponizing bylaws to settle personal scores. They didn't name her, but everyone knew. Funny thing is, she tried to sell her house twice. Both times, the showings were interrupted by TikTokers standing at the fence. Phones out. Whispering. That's her yard. That's the fence. One teenager even filmed a reenactment of the infamous clip, complete with a toy pair of plastic wire cutters. Last I heard, her listing price had dropped 3 times. Turns out, nobody wants to buy a house where the HOA president became a meme. And yet, through it all, I never raised my voice. I never hit back. I let her dig her own hole. One call. One clipboard. One violation at a time. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's still. It's the kind that walks the fence at dawn. Coffee in hand. Knowing there's no one left filming you from across the yard. Sometimes, the best revenge is peace. She wanted control. I wanted peace. And I kept mine.